Now, you've really got to love it when there's a new thing on the market, and I don't know if you've heard, the ZV-E10 Mark II has just come out. And this is actually the first mirrorless camera from Sony since the A9 Mark III last year. So, what are we expecting out of this camera? Well, they've done a few interesting things here. So before we start talking about specs and all of that kind of jazz, what we're going to do is actually talk about how we're going to be filming this today. What we're going to do is going to be putting it in the hands of a content creator. To really test out the ZV-E10 Mark II, instead of me using it for the most part today, I've actually got somebody that helps us out with our social media, Sophie. Hello. How's it going?
All good.
So what is your perfect camera?
For us, we shoot with like a variety of different kinds of clients. They require a lot of different things. So sometimes it's photography, sometimes it's videography. A lot of it, however, is obviously social focus. So a lot of it's in portrait mode for reels, short form video. So for us, it's, sometimes we want to look for that higher end camera, but predominantly people need a lot of content and they need it put out fast. So for us, it's having a quick compact camera that's just got everything that needs for great high quality social media content. And so for some of the team who go out and kind of shoot that don't necessarily have the skill set to use a different camera, we love a camera like this that just allows us to go out and get that content quite easily with very little knowledge, but produces what we need.
Of course, with this camera, they have actually released a new kit lens. And again, this is something that I've never really liked about the Sony APS-C lineup, is that kit lens. It's a bit shocking. It's been shocking for a really long time. They really needed to update it, and they finally updated it. Good if they actually tried something new rather than just create a plastic version of their old one. And when I mean plastic, it's absolutely plastic. And it's not as even fantastic as the Plastic Fantastic. But it's really designed for a purpose. It's a lens that is cheap to have on board with this ZV-E10. Again, the target market, and this may actually be you, are people who are just starting out and can't necessarily afford some of the more expensive lineup of lenses, and it gives you a great option to at least start off with. It looks pretty much the same, and it's got optical stabilisation, which is actually quite good. It does have a really intuitive and very powerful audio system on top there as well, which actually actively selects the direction the mics are actually picking up the audio. So why is it important to have good quality content for your socials?
Well, I think it's changed, content in general across social has changed dramatically over the last kind of few years, and where it used to be acceptable to kind of do lower quality content, it's such a saturated market now, and people are kind of clocking on to being able to shoot their own content. We see content creators that produce absolute magic with their content, which means that agencies need to step up their game and be able to produce the same quality content, right? When Reels was first released, they wanted to kind of encourage content creators to use it, and therefore anything shot on an iPhone would perform exceptionally well. Whereas now, the fact that kind of so many people are posting video every single day means that the competition is really strong. And now, unless your audio and your content in general is up to scratch, then it just won't perform against the big content creators or the bigger kind of production agencies that are able to produce that level of content.
Something that the original ZV-E10 actually struggled with a little bit was adding background noise to the audio itself. So I actually hope that the audio that Sophie just did actually makes sense for you guys, but also sounds really good just in camera. When it comes to the Sony ecosystem, what's really great about it is that you've actually got mics that go through the hot shoe. You don't necessarily need that with this camera because you do actually have great audio inside of it. But if you did want to pick up better audio, you have the ability to use these mics without actually having cables, which is actually really good. In many cases, I actually feel like Sony are doing like a Build-A-Bear kind of scheme with what they're releasing with their cameras, where they take out the insides and look at it and be like, you know what, this is good, but let's make it into a vlogger setup. Now, that's not to say that isn't a really good idea, because the ZV-E1 is a great camera, does stuff very different from the FX3, which is what I'm shooting this on. So, in that retrospect, the sensor being a 26 megapixel APS-C sensor from the FX30 is actually pretty good, and it's nice to see in this camera, of course. And then, of course, you got an upgrade in the video specs, and that's something that I would say from shooting with the ZV-E10 in the past, I wasn't as impressed out of the footage that I was getting out of my other cameras, and this is kind of bringing the ZV-E10 line up to the standard of the other cameras. And that is of course having 4K 60p 422 10-bit. You got really high quality footage there, and it's going to be perfect for all of your content creation needs. Is that something that you would want? Something that smooths out your skin in the video automatically?
Depends what kind of day it is. I think that for content creators, that's going to be a really useful tool. For me, I mean, authenticity for me is more key, so I'm not really too fussed on beauty filters on things. I am what I am. But I think in terms of beauty vloggers and things like that, that could be an exceptional feature because, you know, a lot of those kind of edited in post. So for them, I think having it built in and having it still maintain the quality is a really great feature.
Cool. The other thing that I would want to ask is, how does it actually feel in your hands? Because at the moment you currently will run with a A7 III, right? What is it like in your hands there?
It's nice, it's light. It's a lot lighter. So I think if you're out and about and day to day, like, it's going to be a lot easier to carry around. It's not going to be so tiring and taxing on you. It feels nice. Yeah, I quite like it. It's smaller though, so it takes some getting used to.
At the moment, what I've done is actually take off the new kit lens, because through just giving it a go, it's very similar to the original. It's just made out of plastic and feels a little bit like worse built. But you're really expecting that out. Kit lenses, they aren't great. Usually you'd want to upgrade them pretty much straight away. Today we're going to be shooting on the 16 to 50mm f2.8, which is a pretty awesome APS-C lens from Sony. There are a few other suggestions that I would probably say when it comes to other options for an APS-C kind of social media build. And that one would be a 10 to 20mm, a 10 to 18mm, something along those lines to give you a little bit wider plane of view, whilst making sure it's sharp and everything else in between. And let's face it, this next bit is the thing that really has annoyed me the most about Sony cameras in the past, and that's the FW50 battery. Inevitable death of the FW50. If you guys have been a Sony shooter for a long time, you know that this battery is absolutely awful. They finally got rid of it and put a FZ100 battery in there, which means you're going to have much longer lasting battery in this camera, and that's just invaluable. Death to the FW50 because it's shocking. Absolutely blooming shocking. The camera itself forgoes image stabilisation, at least in the traditional sense, on the sensor, which, you know, isn't necessarily super fantastic, but I think this is more to hit a certain price point to get people interested into Sony mirrorless cameras off the bat. And they do actually have active stabilization inside of the camera, which basically crops in on the image to make it a little bit more stable. And we've tried it out on this channel before. It's actually pretty good. But of course, we are missing out on that internal stabilization, which is I don't know, but also doesn't necessarily matter because this is actually at a really good price point. The UI for this camera has got content creators in mind, in the fact that when you turn it to portrait mode, it actually rotates the UI in the camera, which is actually super useful, and I believe it's the first camera to actually do this. So again, that's a really cool feature, and it's nice to actually see from Sony. And I hope it's actually in some firmware to come in the future, because everyone does portrait videos these days and it's super useful. Who's this really going to be for? Well, in some cases you might consider it a B cam to be able to get behind the scenes footage of when you're actually shooting things for that ever important social media content. Personally, I think this camera is going to be more successful amongst content creators just in general, and the people coming into the creative industry. People that want a one-stop solution to be able to take photos, audio, video for their entire creative process to make sure they get those posts out on time, and I think this camera can do it. So this camera is a bit of a beast for the price point in which it is. It actually gives content creators the ability to do quite a bit with it, which, you know, is going to be the most important thing. If you like this video, make sure you like, follow and subscribe if you want to see more. Have a good day.